Hey everybody, welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Zach Drew.
And I'm Andrew Bellers.
You know, there is several things we're going to cover on today's program, and I believe that you're going to learn some new things about the Constitution and about some incredible prophetic words that were given over 150 years ago about America's future. I want to start out with this statement. You see, the educated on the left, for the most part, they really do teach that there are no absolute truths. Now, as a Christian, we know that that is not the case. So they believe there's no absolute truths, eternal by definition, which leads to the belief that there can be nothing long-lasting, nothing that endures, including like a long-lasting governing type of principles. Now, I want to throw out a disclaimer really quickly. I understand that not all on the left think the exact same way. It's just like not all on the right do.
Exactly. Well, the point of that is that our war is not with people. You know, we're not fighting against people. Our war is against principalities, and these are the principles that we're fighting against.
Or pillars. You see, but that's the thing, is that the left, generally speaking, they do have certain pillars, and so does the right. And this general thought really is something that the left does believe that there's no absolute truth. So, with that being said, they therefore view things like the Constitution of America as fluid, living, always changing, kind of like gender. I'm just kidding. That would be another pillar on the left. And it's really to be, you know, they believe that the Constitution is to be interpreted through the lens of today, and not how it was originally wrote to be interpreted, not through the lens of then.
Right.
It's just always changing, always moving, always living, and it's nothing, there's no absolute truth about it.
Well, that is the heart of progressivism, is that truly nothing is sacred anymore, and everything is movable, everything can be changed.
And we're going to be talking about the prophetic nature of this and how this will ultimately lead to the destruction of our republic. So today, we're going to be discussing that. We also are going to be hitting on the reamped efforts to destroy the Second Amendment, and also what I believe to be a prophetic word given about America and her destruction over 150 years ago. So before we get into it, I just want to be vulnerable. I want to be transparent and let you know that it is the holidays, and the last 2 weeks here at the ministry, you know, it's the holidays, and typically this does happen. Donations have definitely been down. And so, you know, we just ask that, you know, if we're giving you content that you love, that we're encouraging you, that we're, you know, building you up and just really just teaching you new things about how to view the world through a proper lens, I pray that you would give to ministry this week, and maybe even think about becoming a monthly reoccurring partner. Just go to www.zachdrewshow.com and click the donate button. You can also write us, and that is also just write to IGBY at P.O. Box 797, Decatur, Illinois, 62525. We really do need your help this month. So as Matt Walsh, Andrew, how he puts it concerning the interpretation of the Constitution, he puts it like this, quote, "The left interprets the Constitution as granting a right to same-sex marriage, to prenatal infanticide, basically abortion,
Right.
and to peddle porn, but no right to religious exercise in your own business, or to the private ownership of firearms, and no power to control what type of immigrants enter our country." You see, there's a different lens. It's like they're viewing the Constitution through a completely different lens than they're supposed to.
Yeah. Or than was viewed when it was written. You know, and the point here is that literally, like we see with the Bible, with perversions of Scripture, and you can make a document mean whatever you want it to mean. And that's what we're seeing with the left.
You see, why does the leadership of the left despise the Constitution? The reason the left despises the Constitution is because it is a conservative document with Christian values embedded everywhere. That is why. You see, and the Constitution was written Basically, whenever the left gets on a pedestal and starts screaming out, change, 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 quick change, decisions of haste, let's do this quickly and radically, revolution. The Constitution was written to basically yell, stop, to a large mob-like crowd, to a fickle crowd, to yell, stop, slow down. Let's think about this. The Constitution was written, it's very difficult to amend the Constitution.
It is.
It demands change to be incredibly slow. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. In fact, the founders, they hated the idea of a king, of a government ruled by despotism. And
absolute power.
Exactly, but they also hated the idea of mob rule. The original democracy, when you think of like Greece or something where there's direct representation, they hated that because, the word mob actually comes from this Latin word, which is mobile vulgus, which literally means the fickle crowd. And they understood the idea that people individually can be smart and well-reasoned. But as a crowd, people tend to herd, and they will run to whatever the newest thing is.
Amen. Here's the thing. I want to share this really quickly with you. I believe that America was so blessed for the first 150 years, truly, because we actually created a type of government that God could honor. It was a type of government that he actually gave to Israel. There's actually a common misconception, we don't have time to go into it today, that there's 12 tribes of Israel. There's actually 13 tribes of Israel, and it's just that certain names are often omitted based on the text. For example, if they're going to war, the Levites aren't mentioned there, but yet you can still read 12 tribes. And so if you actually put all the names together, there's actually 13 tribes of Israel. It's interesting that we really started with 13 colonies. You see, and in Israel's time, God gave them a type of government that was to be honored without a king. Without a king. That God was their king. And there was 13 tribes, and anytime those tribes had issues or grievances, they would take them to the judges of their tribe to work out, to reason, to settle. There was no ultimate man king.
Right.
Their king was God. They were literally created to govern themselves while being governed within by the law of God. And they literally exploded. It was an incredible thing until the Israelites lost their moral compass and elected a physical king, which was King Saul, that grieved the heart of the Father. You see, it's interesting that we started out with 13 colonies, and once the Constitution was written in 1787, we had representatives. We didn't take things necessarily to the king or the president, if you will.
Right.
We took things to our elected congressmen. We took things to our representatives of our state. But then at some point in time, America started to lose its moral compass and scream out for a king. And now we do have a king. It's called the federal government. You see, whenever it was originally written, states had all the power. The sovereign states could make their own decisions. And basically, the federal government was just kind of outlined just to make sure checks and balances, everything was okay, no one got too powerful. That's how it was in Israel. And then once they elected a king, it grieved the heart of the Father. And what ended up happening ultimately to Israel? It's coming destruction. And we're going to draw those parallels later in the show. You see, the Constitution of America, it was written for a moral people, with the understanding that without Christianity at its core, and we're going to be going over the Founding Fathers, some of their quotes, without Christianity at the core of Americans, that the Constitution, that our republic would ultimately fail. You see, the founders, they understood, even while writing the Constitution, that giving the people literally the right to govern themselves, which up until America, we're not talking about Israel here, but up until in modern history, it was the first country ever. It was unheard of. What do you mean? You're going to let the people literally govern themselves? They're going to go crazy. You see, the founders knew while writing the Constitution, for them to let this new country, America, and the people to govern themselves, that it was all hinged on this one thing, that they would first be governed within themselves by God. And once we remove that from the factor, it was going to be the destruction of the republic. Andrew, and we're going to get into more of this in the show, but I just want to talk about one current event story. There's always news about the left trying to destroy our Constitution. Like I said, it's because it's conservative and there's Christian values embedded throughout. But what's the latest? There was a shocking story, Andrew, that took place this week that I'm reading through it literally dumbfounded. I couldn't believe some of the statements that were made. Tell us, what was happening in the news
Well, the
this week?
story is California Democrat threatens nukes if Americans don't hand over their guns.
We need to stop and just pause and just think about that. Nukes. Okay.
Let's have a moment of silence and just
keep going.
Let
How
that
crazy.
sink in. So the story goes, in a USA Today op-ed entitled "Ban Assault Weapons, Buy Them Back, Go After Resistors," Representative Eric Swalwell, who's a California Democrat, argued Thursday that prior proposals to ban assault weapons would leave millions of assault weapons in our communities for decades to come. So Swalwell proposes that the government should offer up to $1,000 for every weapon covered by a new ban, estimating that it would take $15 billion to buy back roughly 15 million weapons. So
this is real. Like this is actually a real story. This is literally a congressman that represents the people of California, that he was elected. You know, I'm reminded of, what's that crazy new Democrat? What's her name?
Oh, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
It's like, if you listen to some of the things that she says, you're literally just like, oh my, like, it's comical. It's horrible, but it's comical. But the thing is if you listen to some of the things, so it's very scary that she has a new place in the House of Representatives. It's a very scary thing that she is there, because she really is. I mean, she really is a communist. She says, I am a socialist, which basically is, it's going to lead to communism. So here's the thing, is that what's more scary than her being a congresswoman now is how many people had to have voted for her. In the same way, how many people would have had to have voted for this guy?
Exactly. And here's the thing, what we're getting into is new, but this representative specifically has run on this for years. I mean, he was elected on this issue. But what is new, or what's breaking, is that John Cardillo, who is a America Talks Live host on Newsmax, tweeted in response, "Make no mistakes, Democrats want to eradicate the Second Amendment, ban and seize all guns, and have all power rest with the state. These people are dangerously obsessed with power."
Right. So this guy tweeted, and he would be tweeting in our favor, saying, listen, this guy's crazy. Someone needs to be able to check this guy. So I agree with that tweet.
So that tweet went out, and then that tweet prompted a further response.
From the congressman, right?
Well, no, first it was from someone named Joe Biggs, who's a combat veteran. And he said, so basically, Representative Swalwell wants a war, because that's what you would get. If you say, turn in your guns or we're going to prosecute you, you're asking for a war with your people. And then the representative responded to that in a tweet. And he said, and it would be a short war, my friend. The government has nukes, too many of them, but they're legit. I'm sure if we talked...
A congressman is saying this.
I'm sure if we talked, we could find common ground to protect our families and our communities.
So this congressman is wanting to buy back how many weapons? It says 15 million. So he's wanting to buy back 15 million weapons, which will cost us, the taxpayers, $15 billion. So that's tax over here. But let's talk about, they want to collect 15 million guns. Okay, so let's just say there's 15 million people that have these assault rifles, Rock Rivers, AR-15s, whatever brand of AR-15. So 15 million people, give us your guns. Give us your guns. Well, the Second Amendment says I can have them. Nope. Nope. No more. We don't honor the Constitution. Give us your guns. What is going to happen? I really do believe that there would be an incredible resistance in America from conservatives, from constitutionalists, saying, no, I have a right to bear arms. And it's actually to bear arms, if you read the Constitution, for that very reason, to protect yourself from an all-powerful type of government, which is the irony here is just too much. A guy says, you realize, in an honest statement, you realize that would cause a war, right? I mean, that's That's an honest view, that it would cause a war. It'd be a civil war. And then the man that represents the Congress, well, we'll nuke you.
Yeah, and so
We'll nuke you.
and so what's interesting is Joe Biggs, who's the combat veteran, who initially replied to the tweet, said, so our government would nuke its own country, basically calling out, like, let me clarify your statement. This is what you said, right? And the congressman said, don't be so dramatic. You claiming you need a gun to protect yourself against the government is ludicrous. But
Hold on. What? Say it again?
He said, you claiming to need a gun to protect yourself against the government is ludicrous.
So, and I'm not saying that we are not in this show in 2018, we're calling out for a revolution of America by any means. But he's actually saying that the very thought that this man projected is ludicrous. That's the very thing that he literally is a congressman of something that took place in 1776 and 1787 based on, the Declaration of Independence and then the Constitution. That's why he has his job. And that whole time period was the people revolting against the government with guns, which is crazy. Now, I'm not saying we need to do that today. I'm not saying that at all. I'll be very, very clear. But it's interesting that the congressman said that's ludicrous, as if saying that's never happened, but it's happened before.
But that is exactly the right that is protected in the Second Amendment. That is exactly why it is in our Constitution.
Wow, it's crazy. You see, are you saying we have 10 minutes left or 10 minutes in? 10 minutes left, thank you. This is our producer, Ricky, letting us know we have 10 minutes left. There's a plan to destroy the Constitution, which I do believe the Constitution was divinely inspired. Now, when I say divinely inspired, I do not mean at all on the same level as the Word of God, by any means.
Right.
But there was several men that prayed for days on end to hear from the Lord to figure out how to run this new country. And I believe that God did guide them. So in the same way, maybe I believe that a fantastic John Bevere book is inspired. It was inspired by the Lord for him to write that book. Now, it's not on the same level of the Word of God by any means, but this is just to say that I believe the Constitution was divinely inspired by the Lord. But the left has been pitching to destroy it, and half of the population has bought into it. I need you, Andrew, to quickly go over this thing that you found concerning a channel, and it's called Prager University. It's a very intellectual Jewish guy that owns it. Tell us some of his thoughts on this.
Like you said, Dennis Prager is an Orthodox Jew, and what he said is that the left is in a war against reality. And he said that there are 5 distinctions at the core of the biblical worldview. And those distinctions are the difference between man and God, the difference between man and animal, the difference between man and woman, the distinction between good and evil, and the distinction between the holy and the profane.
So that's the Old Testament.
Exactly.
Man and God, animal, woman.
But that is the order that God has established, that there are boundaries, there are distinctions that cannot be crossed. And basically the left, since the 18th century, has sought out to systematically destroy each one of those foundations, beginning with the death of God. During the Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason, they said we don't need God to be at the core of our morality, of the way that we see the natural processes. And then that went into Darwinism, which says that man... So first, they said, let's get rid of God. We don't need him. Secondly, they said, Darwinism says that evolution, man came from animal. So now there's no distinction between man and animal.
Another pillar that was set up for us in the Old Testament. Exactly. And now it's even going further than that because of that, well, now, humans and animals were all on the equal playing field. It's like there's no difference between animals and humans.
Yeah, and the next step, what we saw at the beginning of it was the institution of gay marriage. And what we've seen since then is that we've erased the boundary biologically between man and woman. So the minute you get rid of God, the order of all things begins to unravel. So to say that the left is attacking the Republic and attacking, the basic foundation of the Constitution is not insane. It's not an outlandish claim. It's something that we've been seeing working through liberalism and progressivism since the 18th century.
That's exactly right. You see, there's a story about Ben Franklin, and it's outlined in a couple of old journals, okay? You see, in 1787, the Constitution was written. It took over 100 days for a group of men to figure out how this was going to be done. At the very end of the 100-day convention, Ben Franklin walked out of what is today known as Independence Hall. And a certain Mrs. Powell from Philadelphia, kind of aggressively approached Ben Franklin and said, quote, "Well, doctor, what have we got? A republic or a monarchy?" And Ben Franklin, rarely short of words, shot back, and he said this, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." A republic, madam, if you can keep it, would suggest that the very thing that they were toiling over, that this would be the best route to go, this new republic, this new thing where people are governed by themselves, if you can keep it. Think about this. This was the first time in history where people were governed by the people. You see, the idea that our government, as we the people, it's not just some corny idea that doesn't mean much. It's something that is utterly real. It is, in fact, an idea of great genius and is the main operating principle by which this nation has stayed alive and has expanded its freedoms for over 2 centuries. But once we, the people, begin to forget that and cease to do what is necessary as Americans, it all begins to fall apart. That is a quote from Eric Metaxas on a book outlining the Founding Fathers and how the Constitution was written. Let me just show you how Christianity was embedded throughout the Constitution. John Adams, the second president of the United States, apart from faith will lose the republic, he literally says this, quote, "We have no government unbridled by morality and religion." We have no government separated from morality and religion. Here's another quote. "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to a government of any other." This is literally John Adams, the second president of the United States, saying that it is wholly inadequate. The Constitution is completely inadequate to a government that doesn't have religion, Christianity, at its core, because they talk about Christianity here. Eric Metaxas on the subject said that Adams understood that the secret of self-government is that people must themselves be self-governing. In other words, we have to be motivated by something beyond the law. Here's George Washington on "Apart from Faith Will Lose the Republic." In his farewell address at the end of his second term in 1796, he said this, "Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principles." National morality cannot prevail apart from it. And national morality cannot prevail apart from Jesus. This is how they wrote the Constitution. So what would enable a group of people to be trusted, to govern themselves, and to actually then do so? One word. That's religion. That's Jesus. Jesus. I want to finish with this. We have 5 minutes left. You see, for those who are history buffs or know anything about history, you'll be familiar with the name Alexis De Tocqueville. He was a French aristocrat that lived in the 19th century. Now, about a little over 40 years after the Constitution was written in 1787, everyone around the world is truly in awe of America. So this French aristocrat came here to America to study our penitentiaries, how we did the jail and prison systems, because it was just basically unheard of. It was a really great system, and he wanted to come and study it. So he did. He came over here and he studied it, and he ended up staying for a very much of an extended stay for one reason. He was marveling at America and couldn't quite understand the wonder of it all. How did this happen? Why are these people the way they are? So he ended up he came here to study the penitentiary system and then just stayed and marveled at America. And from his experience here during that trip, he returned to France and wrote his classic 2-volume work called Democracy in America. Now there's another book called If You Can Keep It. And I really recommend that you read this. And I'm going to quote something. I've read it. And I want to read something from that book. And it says this, referring to Alexis De Tocqueville. When he returned to France, Alexis De Tocqueville, he wrote his now classic 2-volume work, Democracy in America. The gist of what Tocqueville concludes may ironically be summed up in a famous, most misattributed quote to him since 1941. And the quote was this, and it's been quoted from, Eisenhower, Reagan, Clinton. Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good, and if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. Now, Alexis de Tocqueville didn't actually say that, but this quote is summing up his entire 2 huge volume work, Democracy in America, because here is something else. It says that the founders, in this book, if you can keep it, it says the founders staked their lives and reputations on these fundamental ideas. And 5 decades later, their bet had proved to be true, or safe rather. Because when Tocqueville came to visit, he quickly saw that it was indeed religion that worked hand in hand with American freedom. This is a quote from Alexis de Tocqueville. Here's a direct quote. Upon my arrival in the United States, the religious aspect of the country was the first thing that struck my attention. And the longer I stayed there, the more I perceived the great political consequences. So he's here marveling at America, marveling that they're the way they are because of Jesus. The pulpits are aflame. And then he says, but there's an incredible consequence to all this. And I believe that this, whether he knew it or not, was prophesying of what could come of America. Here's a direct quote that we all should have within our minds and our hearts today. This is a quote. What could possibly be those consequences of such a wonderful country? Here's the quote. Despotism, which means absolute power, may govern without faith. But liberty, which is freedom that the people have, it can't. Religion is much more necessary in a republic because, well, we govern ourselves. So religion is much more necessary in the republic, which they set forth in glowing colors than in the monarchy which they attack. It is more needed in democratic republics than in any other. And here it is. How is it possible that society should escape destruction if the moral tie is not strengthened in proportion as the political tie is relaxed? Saying, America will be destroyed if the moral tie doesn't get tighter and tighter, if you're not governed more strongly and more strongly by what he referred to as the pulpits on fire with Jesus. He goes, the more freedom you give a person, the tighter that moral tie has to be. Saying, freedom without Jesus, freedom without Jesus at the center of the Constitution of America, destruction will take place. And I believe that that is the stage that is being set today. We're out of time for today's program. I really want to encourage you to please stand with us this month. We need your help. Just go to ZachDrewShow.com and click that donate button. We'll see you next week.